me. So anyway, I'm going to turn this over to Interim Dean David Owen, who is Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences.
Thank you, Lindsay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's panel discussion. I'm really looking forward to this particular topic. The Black Lives Matter actions across the nation have generated a new discourse that gives us an opportunity to confront systemic racial oppression and white supremacy. The College of Arts and Sciences is uniquely positioned to contribute to this discourse and the struggle that attends it, and that are both essential for change. ANS has a long history of engaging in this struggle for racial justice, from the hiring of Dr. Charles Parrish as the first Black faculty member at U of L in 1950, to the activism of students in the late 1960s, which included our former dean, Blaine Hudson, to the founding of the Pan-African Studies Department 45 years ago, the founding of the African American Theater Program in 1993, and the many scholar activists on the faculty today. In the current context, we are recommitting as a college to embedding anti-racism in our curriculum, policies, and practices. The students we will hear from today are all MLK Scholars. The Martin Luther King Scholars Program brings together some of our brightest students for leadership development that trains them in both theory and practice, so that theory can inform action and action can inform theory. The aim is to foster citizens who are informed, engaged, and passionate. These students fully embody these characteristics. And I am pleased to introduce Dr. Cherie Dawson-Edwards, who will facilitate today's discussion. She has served as chair of the Department of Criminal Justice since 2018, currently directs the Social Change Program, and previously served as acting director of the Ann Braden Institute for Social Justice Research. And I'm especially excited to tell you all that on October 1st, she will join the Dean's office as Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She brings to that position a deep commitment to belonging, equity, and social justice, a passion for educating the next generation of engaged citizens and scholars, and a track record of engagement with our community. She works tirelessly and selflessly to bring scholarship and activism together for justice and change. And we are very fortunate to have her on the faculty of the College of Arts and Sciences. So welcome, Cherie.
Thank you, Dean Owen. I'm super excited to be here with these students. A couple of them I can claim as social change minors, and maybe I can convince Arii to come on over to social change. She's like, no. I mean, they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. So maybe I can convince Arii after this conversation to come on over with the social change with us. So like the dean said, I am here today to just moderate a discussion between David, Arii, and Nicole about student activism, what it means to them, what it means for us in this community, in this country, and particularly on our campus. So this is a very informal conversation because they all know me and I know them. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves instead of me telling you about them. I want this to be about their voices and give them agency. So my first question is just a kind of a prompt to get you all to introduce yourself. And if we can just go in the order that I have you listed on my paper. So Arii, if you will go first, and I have Nicole and then David. And so just the ground rules for this conversation is I'll pose a question and just, indicate to me you all can freely discuss or indicate that you'll take it first or whatnot, so that the audience can follow us. So my first question for you all is to please take a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves. Tell us your name, major, minor, or some of you have multiple majors, classification and hometown, and anything else that you would like people to know about you and where you're coming from in this conversation. And then if you can just briefly describe what this moment means to you and how you are feeling these days. So a little bit about yourself, describe what this moment means to you and just how you are feeling these days. Arii, can you take it first?
Yeah, thanks, Cherie. Or Dr. Dawson-Edwards, I don't know.
It's casual. It's after hours.
So like she said, my name is Arii. I use they, them pronouns. I am an MLK Scholar. I am a senior this year. I'm a liberal studies major. I have been studying anthropology, human geography. I did a semester at Kent State to study nonprofit studies, and Pan-African studies. So I'll be graduating as long as everything goes correctly in the spring, but things are kind of crazy. I work currently with Black Lives Matter Louisville as an operations assistant, and so I do like all kinds of like crazy things, and so that like ties up a lot of my time. Other interesting things about me: I'm from Louisville. I'm from here. I went to Ballard High School. People always want to know that. I don't know why. It's pretty boring. And yeah, I mean, how I'm feeling these days. Today I am feeling really great. I got to like take time and clean my house, which is not something I get to normally do. And just be home all day, which is also not something I get to normally do. And so it feels really nice to be able to do that.
Well, thank you for sharing, Arii. And I apologize for saying your name wrong because people say my name wrong all the time. So I will make sure I get it right. All right. So Nicole, can you share a little bit about yourself?
I have to apologize really quickly. I was using the interpretation setting earlier, so the original audio was muted. So I didn't quite hear the prompt.
Okay.
I want to go ahead and pass it along to David so that you don't have to repeat the prompt and I can kind of piece together between what Arii and David say, what my response is. That way we can be efficient with our time.
Thank you. David?
Hey everyone.
You need me to repeat it?
Nah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is David Echeverria. I use he, him, his, L pronouns. I'm currently a junior political science major with a social change minor. I also currently serve as the president of MLK Scholars program, as well as vice president of the Alpha Pi chapter of Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I'm also the former president of Latino Student Union this past academic year on campus. I was born in Florida, but I went to high school up in Northern Kentucky before coming here to U of L. And how I'm feeling, honestly, I feel pretty exhausted and drained. I think, you know, just the transition from a very long, exhausting summer to this fall semester has been one that I haven't really anticipated or experienced in past years. So just trying to get a hold of, you know, starting this fall semester and everything. But today I'm feeling good. So.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've got the introduction figured out. Again, I apologize for that technical error. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole Sparling. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and ella. I am a senior here at the University of Louisville, and I'm a fourth-year MLK Scholar. I'm from Louisville. My Latinx heritage is from Ecuador, and I'm a double major in biology and Spanish on the pre-med track, and I'm a minor in social change and a certificate recipient of political peacekeeping. I'm also the president, or the current president of the Latinx Student Union. And these days I'm currently feeling stressed and, you know, like sort of backed into a corner in terms of what I want my like activism to be like and how I feel the need or to be called to activism.
Thank you all. So thank you all for doing this panel for sure, but thank you for doing all the other work that you're doing. It has to be a lot. And so that on top of being students, I just want you all to know that I appreciate what you're doing and I also appreciate your time here this evening. So Nicole kind of led us into my next question. So thank you, Nicole. And it is, what does student activism mean and look like from your perspective? So I think that we don't know who's in our audience, but I'm hoping that there are a lot of other students in our audience who are, you know, seeking information on how they can do more. And so can you talk a little bit about what student activism means to you and what it looks like from your lens? And anybody can go. This isn't class.
I can go.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, Arii, go ahead and go. Go ahead and go. You're
Sorry,
fine.
I think my connection is really poor. It's like a little lagging. You can go and I'm gonna switch my Wi-Fi over.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think student activism can look like a lot of things. Personally, I think something to keep in mind when wanting to participate in activism work and community work is to approach things with a very holistic and global view. You know, life doesn't revolve around campus, even though us as students might be on campus a lot, and a lot of what we participate in might be on campus. But, you know, the problems that we face as students are also problems that people face in the community as well, oftentimes. And also, you know, people, you know, come in contact with those problems and challenges across the world and across the United States as well. Important for students, you know, to acknowledge the privilege that we have as students. You know, no matter, you know, where we come from as individuals or where our family comes from, we are ultimately at a university and do have an opportunity to get an education, an opportunity that, you know, a lot of people, even those in the surrounding communities of the universities, aren't given. And, you know, I'm not from Louisville, as I said in my introduction. And you know, a lot of people are surprised about that because of the work that I do in the community and participate in. But, you know, I think it's important as students and as a university as well, that you don't only consume and, you know, occupy a community. You have to also, you know, commit to a community. You also have to invest, whether that looks, you know, monetary, physical, or whatever. But I think that's an important aspect as well, you know, from a student perspective and from a university perspective. I think, you know, with the MLK Scholarship Program, I think something that really helped me in being a student activist was the history of Louisville and how we were able to learn a lot about the history of Louisville. I think that's helped me kind of, you know, see not only the history of Louisville itself and, you know, the different challenges that arise there, but also has helped me find my role in the community and, you know, what where I'm passionate about, because like I said, it can look like a lot of different things and people have different passions and different strengths. I think that, you know, understanding the history of the community that I'm in and that I'm getting an education in has really helped me find my role. So yeah, and I think also just keep in mind for myself, I'm sure Arii and Nicole will agree with me on this, you know, as an activist or as an organizer, I'm working towards global liberation. And so in doing so, that you can't do any work with, you know, there's no room for racism, there's no room for ableism, sexism, transphobia, misogyny, fat phobia, you know, any type of abuse. So that's also a mindset that you have to take in doing any of this work as well. And as students, we have that responsibility, you know, as students and as young people, to change what hasn't been done in the past and move with that mindset going into the future.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Someone else?
So a lot of what I was going to say was actually a lot of what David said. And to me, like the biggest thing is like remembering that like there's a world outside of campus. And I think for me, like my first year, I kind of forgot about that because I'm from Louisville. And so I was like, I'm so ready to get away from Louisville. But then I went to U of L anyway. And then I was just like, let me try and figure out something outside of like just what I know. and so for me, that was like digging in and like doing lots of like on-campus work, but not really having an open mind to, or like recognizing all of the other things outside of campus. And so like, one of the things that we do as MLK Scholars is a service living learning community, and you like partner with the organization and you work with them really closely for a year. And that helped me a lot get like off of campus and just see like people besides the people that I grew up around, and recognize like how powerful it is to offer your time, like so your service to organizations or like causes that we care about. And so to me, I mean, like pretty much everything David said, the biggest thing is really just like spending time off of campus and getting connected with the areas.
Did you all lose her audio? Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear them.
Arii, we lost your audio there and you're frozen. So we'll just keep moving, and I'm sure that they'll come back in just a minute. Nicole, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I can go while Arii, like re-equilibrates her internet. And at any point in time, Arii, if you're ready to go, you can just interrupt me and I can continue later. But I guess in terms of what student activism means to me, to touch a little bit on what David said, it means like education. So as a student at the university, you are beholden to the obligation to educate yourself and use your resources to understand, of course, the like racial like history of Louisville, the history of oppression in Louisville. And I mean, that I think is like the first step that you have to like be responsible for, is take those necessary actions to learn about those crucial things. The next thing, of course, though, too, is determining what does activism mean for you as a person, and what does that mean for you like in your schedule. So activism can mean like high level actions, like high level involvement, but activism can also be something that you do like from your desk at home. And it's not to shame people who work from home, or it's not to like put down people who are also like out there boots on the ground doing that type of work. But you have to figure out what works for you. In particular, in my experience, this summer was incredibly challenging for me because, as I mentioned, I'm a pre-medical student, and this summer was my MCAT summer, my medical school application summer. So all while this was happening, I was having to prepare for the MCAT, which is the biggest exam that I could feasibly take in my life. And it's this huge, big deal, like studying 8 hours a day type of thing. And I'm already like have like that obstacle to overcome, because Black and brown students, like traditionally, like we don't do well on the MCAT traditionally. We don't have as good of a shot as like our other peers. So having to deal with that was one thing. Applying for medical school, writing those essays, getting all my recommendation letters, that was another time-consuming, like challenging thing. And of course, applying for other scholarships during the pandemic. I'm also a medical interpreter. I volunteer at the Backside Clinic. It's formerly called Kentucky Racing Health Services Center. And of course, I volunteered there as much as my schedule allowed during this global pandemic, because I have a responsibility as a Hispanic medical interpreter to not only like use my bilingual skills, but also use my own cultural experiences and upbringing to translate, like, interpret the culture for these patients. So it was really challenging for me to feel that calling to go be active, to want to be with Arii and David, and to really, really be there in person and present, but also to have these other things that I had going on that were like also telling me to like, stay and work from home. And so I was trying to be involved with petitions, and I was trying to be involved with like, calling people about like movements and that sort of thing, like, trying to educate people on social media. And for me, that's what activism like really, really looks like. But again, like it's really difficult as like a pre-med student when you have a calling to, your patient is your first priority and human life is your first priority. And you are seeing on the news these peaceful protesters getting absolutely attacked, and their life and limb like being risked and being attacked with tear gas, with beatings, law enforcement officials escalating violence. It is such an insult during this pandemic to do that. And it's such an insult like to human life. It's their constitutional right to protest, one. And two, how dare you send the medical personnel, and how dare you send any more patients to overrun hospitals who are already dealing with COVID. And as like a future physician, to like see that, to see, people like children getting like tear gassed at these like peaceful protests is just so sickening and so disgusting, and such a it's such like a blasphemous insult to what we're all going through right now, especially with the pandemic. That's my piece. All right, Arii, if you're ready.
Well, I think I was wrapping up. Can you all hear me now?
We can.
I'm not sure what happened. Basically, the gist, like, too long didn't read, like, get off of campus, do things outside, like, of your norm. But I also resonated a lot with what Nicole said. I think it's important. People don't emphasize enough, like, the things that need to be done behind the scenes, not just, like, being on TV.
Gotcha. So, you know, I don't know what you all participated or what you all are participating in as it relates to some of the protests or other, whether it's behind the scene or whatnot. So feel free whenever you know, feel comfortable inserting that part into the story that you're telling about your student activism, then please do so if you have any examples that you want to share with us. But my next question kind of relates to the university. And as a university official, you know, I often wonder what we're not or what we could be doing to support our students. I know that there have been times where students who believed or wanted to, you know, fight for Black lives didn't feel very comfortable in our university. I can say as a faculty member, I mean, you see my shirt that I have on right now, kind of. But, you know, I wore this to work today. It hasn't always been comfortable for me to wear this around our campus. And in this moment, I feel very comfortable doing it and will continue to do so. And I think you all know me well enough to know that I did things anyway, but now I'm more comfortable. And so I want to know what we can do as a university, or what should the university be doing to support student activists? What more can we do? Or what are some good examples of where the university has been supportive of your activism?
So I kind of like had the opportunity to speak about this a little bit on can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. David touched his ears. I was like, oh man, again. I kind of had the opportunity to talk about this a little bit on one of those, I don't know, some staff panel thing. I don't know what it was called.
Like the listen and learn, like the learning cafe.
Like, yes, that.
Okay.
We talked about this a little bit. It came up, and I thought there was someone there who put it, who was able to kind of like rephrase my words in a really good way. And I think what's important is that like university officials, like university staff, like just universities period, need to like recognize that what people are asking for is like an overhaul of a system that exists, not for like this system that is like working to continue to work, but in different ways. And so like an example of that is like when Malia, another MLK scholar, wrote on behalf of the BSU a letter to Dr. Bendapudi to get the university to rescind its contract with LMPD and the relationship that they have with ULPD. And also in that same letter, they were like, well, as well, we need to like consider other ways that the university can become more up to date with racial issues. For example, the honors house, the naming needs to be changed at the honors house. And instead of doing anything about like the bulk of the letter, the university said, we'll change the name of the honors house. And so like that was really kind of like a slap in the face. Like you didn't even address this huge portion of what the work actually was. And a lot of that goes back to just being uncomfortable with like the change. And so like as university officials, as people who work in higher education, like we have to recognize that higher education wasn't built for people who look like the three of us. Or yourself, Dr.
I was about to say, include me in there. Thank you.
So like Tamara Russell and I always have conversations, and I'll be like, I don't understand this thing, or like I don't understand that, when it comes to like different like why people's names are certain things, or like why people's roles are certain things. And she always has to remind me that like it's because we weren't thought about when higher education was created. Like it literally, quite literally was not made for me to understand. And that's a problem. And so like, until we can sit with that as like people who are running universities, and until we can be uncomfortable with that, then like anything else that you have to do for me is like irrelevant. Like changing the name of a building, like yes, it does something and it shows like that you're moving in the right direction, but it's not enough, like at all, like not at all.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with Arii in what she said in terms of it's not enough. Just, you know, adding on like an anti-racist addendum to like the university description to kind of put that particular like patch on their shoulder. To me, it is nowhere near enough. Like the idea of, you know, like higher education not being made for BIPOC is completely true. We weren't like expected to be in these spaces. And so now that we are in these spaces, like, of course, like there are issues, but instead of the university doing or universities in general doing what they should do, which would be to completely rework the system, they're simply like, putting a finger in the dam, putting a like Band-Aid over like the broken bridge instead of actually putting in the work to rework the system. Inclusion to me means, making sure like Black and brown people like are like present in like different like areas. But the problem is it shouldn't even be existing in the first place. The system should have already been reworked to include them in the first place. It shouldn't be an afterthought to have somebody be like, oh yeah, let me double check and make sure that we fill our quota of Black and brown people that need to be in this room. That's just personally like ridiculous to me. Another issue too is that as we continue these discussions of anti-racism, I was present for a forum put on by the student government and with President Bindapudi present, and comments were made about how immigrants are not meant to be a part of these discussions of anti-racism, which is completely untrue, is completely unfair, and was shocking to hear at such a high-level forum. And afterwards, when I was clearly like complaining about it and incredibly upset about it and was going through the channels of, complaining, I was given the opportunity to meet with the high-level university official who said those words. And at that point, I was fed up. Even though I had the opportunity to meet with them and have that discussion with them, I wasn't going to participate in a feel-good like apology or like like false validation. Oh, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention, because the time for talking and the time for those like little mistakes is long behind us and over. Like, now is the time to be taking action. Now is the time to be like pushing forward and beyond any like means or ways of traditional diplomacy. Like, that is now unacceptable, and we have the need for something more.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on, the two main points that Nicole and Arii brought up, which, I mean, ultimately the universities and colleges across the country, and this isn't like just U of L, but 18th, 19th centuries. And they've never been, as Arii touched on, like, they've never been institutions that have been made for people of color, have been made for marginalized groups, because it doesn't just have to do with race, but all marginalized communities. And it's ultimately, universities need to listen to students and listen to them genuinely. And that might seem like a simple answer, but, we have instances in which there are groups that come on campuses and, spread hate or make students feel unsafe. And students will, voice their concern for their own safety, for the safety of others, and they won't be taken seriously. Or there's also situations in which the university can only do so much because of the First Amendment right to free speech. The fact that institutionalized racism, systemic racism is so prominent that policies can be used to protect the perpetuation of this violence towards these marginalized communities and the people. And then touching on what Nicole was speaking on, when I say listen to students, that doesn't mean just students and student government. We're a predominantly white institution, so the student government at PWI is not going to be the source of the marginalized students and the students that you need to listen to when it comes to these issues. So, having forums that are facilitated by SGA or, university officials coming out and saying, well, we've spoken to student representatives for this and this, because ultimately it's the same setup as, the government we see today, and the same issues are replicated here on our campus or on other campuses. So I think there's a responsibility the university needs to take, and that, you know, again, not just U of L, but most universities across the US, that, you know, not only are they not actually listening to students, but they're not giving students a voice and the power, they're taking that power away from them. So I think, you know, just to wrap up those 2 points that both Arii and Nicole brought up, I think those are 2 things that the universities, period, and, you know, as, sorry about that, as universities, or as the university works to be, do anti-racist work, they need to do, and also understanding that anti-racist work is not static. It never has been, never will be. It's a constantly evolving thing, and you need to constantly working towards, you know, towards this global liberation and all that kind of stuff. So there won't ever be the title of an anti-racist university. That's not going to exist, because it's going to be something that's constantly evolving. So if a university is looking for that title, they're never going to get it. So that's where it takes a true dedication to become, you know, anti-racist and approach everything with that mindset. So, yeah.
Well, thank you all for that. And I just want you all to know that, you know, Dean Owen introduced me as the new associate dean. And so I'm going to take this moment to ask you all a question, because as I move into that role, I mean, I think all of you, I'm not sure about Arii, but I think all of you are in A&S in some way. So my question to you, and I do believe in student voice and agency, and I try very hard, not just on this campus, but I work with K through 12 schools, and I advocate for that locally for them as well. But one of the things that's come up in more recent months, as I've had conversations with students that have concerns about the university's response or support for student activism, is this idea that we are sucking intellectual and emotional labor from you, which we are. I mean, I'm not going to deny that we will be doing. If we ask for your voice, then you giving us your voice and your opinions and perspectives is your intellectual and emotional labor. So my question to you is, how do we do both? How do we seek student voice and give students agency and power and decision-making while not sucking you for your intellectual and emotional labor for free? And I think that's an important balance that a university needs to take and make, and one that I'm dedicated to doing. But I just, from your perspective, like, what does that look like? How do we do both of those things?
So I think what you'll find when you open the door, like the students who do have the capacity are the ones who are going to show up. And then I think you'll also find that, like, when you're talking about making large institutional changes, students become interested because of 2 things. One, because they just like want to be able to say that they were a part of it. But 2, because like these are things that we're already talking about. Like these are conversations that we're already having with ourselves. And so like when the university opens the door, for example, there was like a town hall meeting maybe 2 semesters ago with Marian Vassar and someone else, I want to say, about plans for the cultural center. And this was like pre-cultural center being knocked down. And like there was lots of like dissent about the university's like decision. And lots of students had like opinions and wanted their voices to be heard. And like this town hall was had. And then like a bunch of people showed up to this town hall, like so many people that like there wasn't even enough like time for every person's like opinion and like, you know, like voice to be heard, I guess. But like that's a good thing, because then like that means that the desire is there, and like then as a university it's your job to like turn around and like make that space become available more frequently, so that way people can actually be heard. And so like I don't think it's a matter, I guess what I'm saying is I think that like, yes, you are as a university asking for like folks to like use intellectual and emotional labor, but also that's kind of a stupid excuse to not take the initiative, because if the people have the interest, they're going to make themselves available. And if they have the capacity, they're going to make themselves available. Now, like, that's like how, I would say that within the framework of like getting people's voices to be heard, not within the framework of like creating new policy or like creating new structures. That's like a whole other situation. And I think they're like, you just need to hire a professional to do it and then ask for our opinion about it. Like, it's kind of twofold, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially the last piece about, you know, them being two separate things. Because I mean, when it comes to, you know, policy and how that the input that students have with that. I mean, I've served on CODRA this past year. I currently serve on the committee for diversity and racial equity that reports to the president's office. And, you know, a lot of the work that they do as a group is towards policy and towards those issues. But that's an example of, I was, you know, given a seat at the table because I was president of the Latinx Student Union last year, and I currently serve there as an HLI leader. But that's a situation where, you know, we had, I believe it was bi-weekly meetings or once a month had a meeting, and I'd be having to hop in between my classes, you know, for 30 minutes there, 45 minutes there, 50 minutes there. Whereas everyone else on the committee are all faculty and staff, which of course not all of them they're not really getting paid for it, but they do work at the university, which both are problems where, you know, they're having to, you know, give up their time of the day in order to give input, because ultimately this isn't just a student issue, right? So I mean, this includes staff and faculty and people at physical plan and all that kind of stuff. And part of the advocacy part of that for those groups is through CODRA. But as a student, you know, I was having to have that extra meeting, and, you know, I was hopping in between classes. Everyone else, that's part of their agenda for the day is to be a part of that meeting. So it is a difficult balance because, you know, it gave me an opportunity to have my voice heard, and those that, you know, I was speaking along with. But it's also, you know, to me that it seems like skilled labor. Because it is something that university needs to improve on, and they say they want to improve on. And so skilled labor deserves to be paid, deserves to be compensated. If it's not, you know, monetary pay, it can look like, you know, credits for, you know, coursework and all that kind of stuff. But there needs to be some type of compensation for that skilled labor. Because ultimately, especially for students, it's something that, you know, even when I signed that contract for the MLK Scholarship, a lot of what I've done, it hasn't been under that contract. I'm not, you know, I've never signed up on a contract for this kind of work. Not something I'm passionate about, and something that I think needs to, that I want to be involved in, but I don't always have that capacity. And in situations like that, where, you know, I was picked as a representative, and I you know, even being president of Latino Student Union, that wasn't one of the responsibilities that was under that role until after the fact. So I think that's also a common theme is, you know, student of color or someone in a marginalized community will take a role, and then all of a sudden you have more and more and more and more put on you. And I know staff and faculty understand that as well.
Okay. Oh, so, I know.
Yeah, and it's like this, and this is new, right? Like we've known this, and this has been a discussion. But again, when it comes back to what can the university do better, what can universities do better in, you know, these institutions, all of it's been laid out for them. So similar to what Arii said, the excuses are, you know, if it's about participation, a lot of participation has to do with who's facilitating the discussion, and where it's being facilitated and where it's being held, whether students will actually take it seriously, or if they think it's performative, because that will definitely, you know, change how students approach things. So, I mean, overall, I think that, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But yeah.
Thank you. Nicole, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, so I think that Arii and David like hit it right on the head in terms of like facilitation and like how many people are involved, and also like the fact that like the university sort of like cherry picks sometimes the students that it chooses to like listen to. But in terms of like facilitation and really opening the floor to like student agency, the university needs to understand it cannot like do this by working with solely SGA. Like it cannot. Like I have chronically and like often like felt grossly misrepresented by SGA I, like, the time that I was in that forum that I was mentioning before, like, I had no intention of going beforehand. And eventually I decided to go just to sit in and listen to, like, the shenanigans that were said, and see if there was anything valuable said. And I was, like, thankful that I was there to, like, catch that, like, gross, like, misstatement. But yeah, like, so the university needs to, like, open up these spaces to large groups of students and not just, like, look to, like, Black and brown, like, leadership on campus. And they need to host these forums with, like, BSU, with LSU, with HLI, with the Ali Scholars. Those need to be their partners, not SGA, because Black and brown students are not going to show up to solely, like, partnered SGA events. They're just not. And that's just the truth of it. Additionally, like David was saying, as a president of the Latinx Student Union, I also have a seat on CODRA. But I remember when beforehand last year, I was the Latinx Student Union treasurer. I remember David mentioning CODRA, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, that sounds really interesting. That sounds really cool. How can I get involved? And it's only this year that I understand it's just open to, like, the Latinx Student Union president, which I'm in these CODRA meetings. And I remember, like, my first meeting, there were 2 students and something like 70 staff members. And that's just completely wrong on so many levels. Like, the university, yes, it's like a combination of, like, staff, faculty, students, but you need to have so many more like, students, like, in these spaces than just 2. Additionally, you can't just be cherry picking, like, oh, I'm gonna, like, only open up this invitation to these sets of students, because in terms of where the exhaustion and the burden comes from, that's where it comes from, because the university taps you and is like, okay, you go, you talk, you're the leader, I want to hear what you have to say. But there are so many other people who can contribute to that discussion the university just blatantly ignores. And in the CODRA meeting, when I brought this up, because I saw, like, there were only 2 of us, and I brought this up and I was like, this is wrong, what can we do? Like, did we schedule it at a bad time? Like, why are there only 2 of us? And they said, well, you think of, like, anyone else that you feel like you should invite, and, like, we'll vet to see if that's, like, a good idea, and then we'll let them in. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It should just be an open invitation. Like, students who want to, like, come in and participate should be allowed to come in and participate. It shouldn't just be limited to what the university considers to be the upper crust of, like, student leadership. Like, it shouldn't just be limited to the Latinx Student Union president, the BSU president. No, like, it should be open to EBOR, to general body members of those organizations. It should be open to just students who are like, hey, I'm Black, hey, I'm Latinx, and I'm a student on campus, and I'm interested in, like, sort of, like, furthering my cause at the university. It should literally be that simple. The university just doesn't understand that.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. That was a question that I added. It wasn't even in the list of things that I thought about before, so thank you all for that. So we're wrapping up towards the end of the hour, and we were supposed to do some Q&A towards the end, and I just got a note that says the chat isn't working. I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then try to leave a couple minutes at the end for any of the folks that are participating, if they want to raise their hands, if they have a question that they want to ask you, then I think Lindsay will recognize who those folks are if they raise their hand. But I do want to cover a couple things that, you know, since this panel was created and planned, a couple things that have come across I'm sure, our social media or news feeds that are related to activism. And I just wanted to see you know, what you all had to say about it. So just, I guess it was over the weekend, I think that we probably all saw that Trump decided that critical race theory was a bad thing and anti-American, and has decided that federal agencies could not spend their dollars on that training. And we were talking about student voice and agency, so this kind of leads to that. And one of the 5 tenets of critical race theory is about storytelling and counter storytelling, and that when we call for social change, that there has to be a moment of truth telling before you can lead to healing and racial reconciliation. So I just want to know, just quickly, talk to me about your reactions to the idea that critical race theory is anti-American, and the ban on that type of work.
Yeah, I actually am really excited to answer this question because first of all, it's very, very, very crystal clear. Trump is not for Black, Latinx, trans, queer people at all. 100%, punto, period, done. The idea of storytelling in terms of critical race theory, of like storytelling and counter storytelling, is so important to like our culture, to Black culture, to brown culture, like brown is in like Latinx culture, because that's all we have. Like, we don't talk about our histories in class. We aren't taught our histories in class. And the only thing we have is oral tradition. Like at U of L, we have the Latinx Oral History Project, where we have people share their testimonials about their immigration experience, their oppression experiences. And that's the only way, like through oral history and storytelling and truth telling, that we can spread that information. It also, like, to defund those initiatives of sensitivity training, diversity, like in racial training, critical race theory education, that sets up a whole entire loss of identity. It sets up a loss of appreciation of the varying cultures, the traditions, of course, a loss of appreciation for identity. And it just creates the system of assimilation, because if you're losing the whole thing of understanding, appreciating the differences, then it sets up that one system of assimilation that preferentially ends up benefiting white people or rich people. And this also emphasizes, like, of course, opportunities for there to be cultural disinformation. So if we can't have the opportunity to speak our truths and to learn about our history, of course, there's going to be the ability for, like, for example, the far right uses this as a destabilization tactic of spreading disinformation to divide Latinx people, to divide Black people, like completely through, of course, just squashing our voices and our abilities to tell, like, our stories. But yeah, that's my answer to that question.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, then my next question, oh, Arii, did you have something? I saw you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it's too much. I mean, like, really, it's just too much. A lot. I knew Nicole was gonna have the answer, because she's always mad every time he does some stupid stuff. She's always like, and I love it, because she echoed a lot of the things that I was thinking and feeling. But I think also, like, are we surprised at this point? Like, you know, like, I think that really it is like a conversation now about
how we as like, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the AirPod died. How we as like institutions or as
Oh, now we can't hear you. Oh, now we can.
Can you hear?
Yes.
How we as like institutions decide to move in our spaces, because like I think it should be like far from surprising that he would do this in the middle of everything that's going on. I mean, like, he thinks that there's going to be a vaccine before election day. Like, and so like it's really more so a test of like, as for example in this case, like as a university, what are our ethics and like what things are like important to us, or and moving from there. I think focusing on the things that like we can change and not like being so, I just don't have the energy personally to be mad at him anymore. 4 years is like long enough.
Gotcha. So really quickly, because we have like 8 minutes, but I did want to get to the other like kind of current event, and I think that you all would have, you know, some input on the reality of protest. And so you might have seen the report that came out called Demonstrations and Political Violence in America, using data from Princeton University. It revealed that 93%, I've seen this as 93% to 95% of racial justice protests in the US have been peaceful. What have your experiences at protests, or what you've heard, or what you've experienced yourself, what have your experiences at protests been as it relates to peacefulness or violence?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as someone who, you know, I am a community organizer, and I was very active in a lot of demonstrations and actions throughout the summer. That statistic isn't surprising to me. I wish that people would take it probably more seriously, because I feel as though it will probably be it has been discredited. It has been combated quite a bit. It's quite evident when you are down there, and if you know about police tactics, that, you know, LMPD here in Louisville have been the instigators. They have been throughout the entire summer, since the end of May. You know, people like to distinguish, you know, between peaceful protests and riots. But oftentimes, you know, it's not as though, sometimes it is, but oftentimes it is one simultaneous action or group or whatever. And the instance in which it changes from a peaceful protest to what people may call a riot, is when police interact, interfere, attack, try to disrupt, and, you know, react with whether it's tear gas, rubber bullets, or any of their tactics. So, I mean, I also think it's important to differentiate the you know, description of violence, and how, you know, a lot of people will equate the destruction of property to violence. And, you know, I think that's an important topic to discuss. You know, I've seen much more outrage in this throughout the media, throughout social media. You know, a lot more outrage about the burning down of property in this across the country. The burn down of property, the destruction of property, the looting, more so than the deaths of, you know, protesters, of civilians, of, you know, and that just seems pretty asinine to me. You know, David McAtee here in Louisville, that was a result of interactions with police, of the National Guard, of the implementation of those tactics, and yet that got a lot less attention than the destruction of property that occurred around Louisville. And for me, as someone, you know, I operate within abolitionists and, you know, a radical mindset, but I just can't, you know, that the property or any kind of anything of monetary value being destroyed can be equated to the loss of someone's life. Seems pretty crazy to me, but.
I'm glad you brought up that, you know, equating property damage or even loss, but in particular property damage, because it really leads us to part of another question. And I think this might be all the same question that Nicole and Arii could jump in on as well. And so, you know, you've talked a lot about being leaders on campus with the LSU or whatnot. And I just wonder if you all could touch on some of the discord or apparent discord between, you know, Latinx folks in our community and people fighting for Black lives. In particular, if we think about the local incident, the NULU demands and that. And I know I try not to argue people on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, but sometimes I get caught up, and someone was like that a plant was thrown over, and that means that if they don't do the demands, they're going to destroy the restaurant. I was like, wait, because the plant was actually turned over, that it escalated to now they're going to blow up the restaurant. So just, you know, in the context of the last question, you want to talk a little bit about that issue locally and where you think it is, or, you know, clarify for some folks about the relationship between Black and brown folks in this moment in our community.
Yeah,
Nicole,
I can certainly. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I can speak to that. And I was actually going to lead in with this incident because David said something really interesting about how the media like affixes itself on absolutely like just the wrong like stuff, and just completely blows like stuff out of proportion and equates like loss of life with like loss of property, which like as a future physician, it's just on so many levels like messed up. But to just give a little bit of context too, so with the NULU incident, some members, not all, but some members of the Cuban and Venezuelan Latinx community here at Louisville, like they dissented to the NULU demands. And I want to make it very, very, very clear that even though the like media is like affixing this, like as affixing on this, like, and like making it seem like it's like the voice of the Latinx community, it's not. It just happens to be the loudest voice because the media is making it the loudest voice. They are literally the tiniest minority of the community that's saying this, and all of the rest of us, in terms of who are like, absolutely not, like this is not okay, like we're all just freaking ignored. And again, like I mentioned earlier, with the whole like the banning of the critical race theory and like the storytelling and counter storytelling, this is again a tactic of misinformation to divide Black and brown people, and even in this case to make the divisions within the Latinx community. This is a tactic that, as we're all on, like, to use an analogy here, as we're all on this sort of like bus to liberation, we're all on this like path, and that means Black people, that means brown people working together for the anti-Blackness within the Latinx community, which, yes, it's there and we need to address it and discuss it. It just has to be addressed and discussed. But we have to work together on this, and we're on this path. It's information like this and disinformation that kind of splits us up, that splits us up, gets us off the path. And then as far as like for like Latinx education, Latinx is an American umbrella term that encompasses 26 different countries. It encompasses various different races. Latinx people can be Black. Latinx people can be indigenous, can be mestizo, can be white. It is literally just this umbrella term that we like barely have to use to get by in the United States, because otherwise they call us like different terms, and this is barely like our way of like reclaiming it. But the point of understanding like Latinx history, which is so important in terms of continuing oral tradition and continuing like critical race theory training, is understanding like it's incredibly ignorant to be anti-Black because it's also being anti-Latinx. And as a member of like the Latinx community, to be anti-Black, to behave in those ways, and their excuse is, oh, like we, like as like Cubans, we have our ish about communism. Nobody mentioned anything about like communism in this particular discussion. This is just out and out being anti-Black. This is just out and out being wrong. It's even being anti-Latinx. It's being anti your own identity. And it is not, and I don't speak for everybody in the Latinx community. I am just like a student leader, but in my personal opinion, it is not the like opinion of the entire Latinx community. And it's unfortunate that this is the loudest voice.
Thank you, Nicole. I knew you'd have lots to say about that question, so I wanted to make sure I got that in there. So we are about out of time, but I do want to end this giving you all an opportunity to give us a call to action, like whether it's the country, community, or campus, or classes, whatever, colleagues, what is your charge for us? So you all gave us a wealth of knowledge, and thank you for sharing your time and your intellect and your emotional labor. But what is your call to action for us? And you can choose whoever, us or all of us, that you want to speak to.
I would say just because like from like my student perspective and from my like nerdy student perspective, and this might sound silly, but I honestly think education is one of the biggest forms of dissent that like you can take. If you go and you educate yourself about what the truth is, what the real history is, so that you can like make informed decisions about like actions, so you can help like quash any disinformation, like that's something that you can do like from the comfort of your own home, from the comfort of your own bed, as someone who like struggled with trying to be active with the activism. Like just literally educate yourself from like verifiable sources. And like I encourage people to go check out the Latinx Oral History Project. It's at the Ekstrom Library. And there are also various oral history projects that you can find online concerning the Black community. But you need to get out there and educate yourself.
Arii or David?
Yeah, I'll just go real quick. Yeah, I mean, I would really, push everyone. I mean, similar to what Nicole said, engage in some critical thinking, and, try and educate yourself, try to challenge yourself, make yourself uncomfortable. We talked about the labor on Black and brown students, on Black and brown people, on BIPOC in general. And part of the way you can alleviate some of that is by engaging in that critical thinking, whether it's by reading a book, whether it's by talking to other individuals. One of the books that, I mean, I'm sure many of, especially the faculty and staff have read, but Pedagogy of the Oppressed is a easy one to start out with, and pretty accessible. And, you know, just making sure that you engage in that, because also because one of the things I think, you know, when we talk about Trump's decision about, you know, banning the trainings and stuff, part of that is because a lot of people are comfortable with being comfortable, especially white comfort is something that's catered to a lot. And, but, you know, you have to understand also, like, the structure and, you know, the structure of society and systems are not for anyone. You know, capitalism and all these structures are built to oppress people, period. But especially those with Black and brown skin. But just understanding, you know, how these systems are working against people, and just engaging at critical thinking would be what I would say, just to start out, because it's a good first step.
Thank you. Arii?
So I was like rushed. I had like all these ideas, and I'm just like, I don't know which one's the good one. I think the easiest thing for people to do, I have like 2 separate ones. So like for white folks, like read Guns, Germs, and Steel. Like start there. Like if you haven't read anything else, like read that. And just like learn more about your privilege, but also like about what it means like to be a white person and in spaces where we're fighting for Black liberation, in spaces where we're fighting for like towards anti-racism. And then like for Black folks or BIPOC folks, like people who are not white, my like action to you would be to read Emergent Strategy, and to learn about what it means to learn more about like transformative justice and like how to be transformative like in yourself. Because like something that we're fighting, like, yes, we're fighting like all of these like systems and we can't like see, and like all of these like things that are like big and like theoretical, but like we're also fighting like ourselves. We're also fighting like our own intentions and the ways that like that our own minds work, because we've been indoctrinated for so long to think like a specific way through education and whatever. And so like learning and practicing transformative justice like at home with your family, with the people like that you are friends with, or like around like your close-knit circle, whatever that looks like, is really a great way to then like learn how to be in movement spaces, because a lot of times that is what is reflected in our spaces as well. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone that attended. I thank you all. I mean, I'm not surprised, but this was awesome. And thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your perspectives. I promise I won't call you and suck you from your intellectual and emotional labor, or I'll find a way to compensate you, not monetarily perhaps, but in some way. I will work towards figuring out how to do that for students like you all, and I appreciate you. And just know that I'm grateful that we have voices like yours on campus, and I encourage you to keep at it, and you are supported, just so you know that. And so with that said, I hope everyone has a good evening, and this was awesome. And I hope to see you all soon, especially those of you who are graduating. I hope I see you before you graduate. Good night.